Hey, welcome to Kate's Crafts. I'm Kate. Today I'd like to share with you what I did with this leftover flower market paper from Lawn Fawn. It was from a previous project I did, and the cardstock was just too pretty to throw out. So what I'll do with the shorter bits is I will cut them down to 1 inch, and the longer, skinnier bits, I will cut them down to about 1/2 inch. And I will do this for each of the scrap pieces of paper, and I will be making 2 cards today. So once I've got that cut out, I am going to take a card panel, which is 4¼ by 5½. These will be A2 size cards, and I'm applying some clear Elmer's glue on top of the tape runner that I'm using, which is Scrapbook Adhesive. So I'm just taking my card panel and making sure that it's even on the lines or close to being even, and I got a little bit of washi tape on the back to kind of hold it down. So what I'm doing with these panels of cardstock is I'm going to offset them a little. Like you'll see here in a second, I will line up the dark stripes with the light and the light stripes with the dark, and I'll carry this pattern all the way up to the top just to kind of give it a little interest in offsetting the lines. So once I've got the top set done, I am going to finish off the next card. So here I'm making sure everything's nice and flat, and I'll set that off to the side. So here I have another 4¼ by 5½ inch card panel, and what I'm going to do with the skinnier strips here is I'm going to line them up on this card panel, but I'm going to leave just a little bit of a gap. Now I'm not being precise with this. It was after work, I was tired, but I wanted to do something, and I had this idea kind of bouncing around in my head all day, because these scraps of paper have been sitting off to the side. Like I said, they were too pretty just to throw out, and Lawn Fawn makes such pretty patterned paper, so I thought I'd use up the scraps in a scrap card, and that's what I'm doing here. So all I'm doing is taking the tape runner and adding it to the back of the strip with a little bit of glue, just in case I don't get the placement right. And I'm going to line that up vertically on my card. And once that's done, I'll go back to the first one, and I will take the outside in-stitched rectangle die, and I will cut out a smaller card panel using that. This will give me a lovely little border around the base of the card, just to kind of offset the color here. And I'll do this to both of them, just to give them both that stitched outline to them, which I think is really pretty. You'll get to see here in a second what it looks like. Wow, so neat. I love this striped pattern paper. So what I'm doing here is I've taken a scrap piece of black cardstock, and I just want the top and the bottom stitch, and then I'll do the same thing for the white, but I want the side stitches for this, and you'll see here in a minute I'm going to make almost like a little band to go in front of it. Now for the white one, I believe it was 2 inches that I cut it, but later on I didn't really much like the width of it, so I ended up cutting it down to 1.5 inches. And I'll do that for the longer piece too. You'll see here what I intend to do with it. And this I'll cut down to, I think it's 1.5 inches as well. So once I've got that lined up, I'll just trim that off, and then I'll compare it to my cardstock just to make sure that I like it and I'm happy with it. But I'm going to just trim it down just a smidge, just to kind of give it a little more color on each side. So you can see here the measurement. I end up cutting down that white one. Now here I've got the Magic Message sentiment stamps from Lawn Fawn. And what I tend to do is heat emboss this in white Wow embossing powder, and I'll stamp this a couple of times out in the Versamark ink, and then I'll add my white embossing powder to it. Now I've added the anti-static powder to it already off camera, and you can kind of see how powdery it is. I'll be able to get that off later. You'll see in here in a minute, but I've got to make sure that I put this away. I get so worried that I'm going to spill these jars that I end up putting the lids on before I put the dust back into the jar. So I'm going to heat up my heat tool here, and I'll heat up the back first until it just starts to curl, and then I'll go into the front and make sure that I melt out all that embossing powder on it. So This is always the fun part, watching the plastic melt. So here I'm doing something a little bit different. I've got the Distressed Oxide and Mustard Seed, and I'm going to emboss with it. So I'm going to ink up my stamp quite a few times just so I can get a good crisp impression. Careful not to push down too hard because I don't want this to smoosh everywhere and kind of muddy up the lines of the lettering. So as you can see, I do this a couple times. I tend to do this for all my stamping. Usually, 2 or 3 times just to get a good image. Sometimes a 4th or a 5th, depending on how I feel. I kind of find stamping a little relaxing. So here I'm going to take it out, and I've already put the anti-static powder on it. I didn't put a whole lot because what we're going to use here is a clear glitter embossing powder. This is probably my favorite, just because you can go over any color of ink to give it a raised effect, and it's got this pretty little glitter to it. So I'll put that off to the side as soon as I can figure out how to put the lid on, and then I'll heat emboss this one as well. Again, I'm going in through the back because I don't want to blow off all the glitter from the top, and once I've got that completely melted, you'll be able to see here in a minute what we're going to do next. So the Magic Message stamp set. Now I've got the Holiday Magic Message stamp set, and the only difference I found between those is that each of them have like little tiny extra dies to them. Like I think the Christmas one has Christmassy stuff, and this one has like airplanes or something. So I didn't end up getting the second die set because I already had this one, but I ended up cutting those little circles out with the die that came with the Christmas message one. And, oh, here's where you can see me cutting this one down, because I wasn't quite satisfied with the width of it. So I'll take that down. I think that's 1.5 inches. And that'll go across there. See, I think that one looks a lot better. So what I'll do with this is I will take a microfiber cloth, and I've spritzed it with just a little bit of water. Not wet, not damp, just a little bit, and I find that that takes off that anti-static powder from the black cardstock. So I've got that all adhered to the panel. I didn't get to show that. But here I've got, I think the last pink I used was Picked Raspberry, and I'm just using what's left on my brush from a previous project to go over that edge, because I didn't quite like the white compared to the dark. So this was Hickory Smoke, I believe, that I used last, and I didn't quite like it either. So I go in with my my blue here, and I think it's Tumbled Glass was the last one I used as well. I don't know, I kind of like having like these brushes on my desk with, leftover ink on them, because you don't have to pull out your ink pad if you just need a little bit. And you still have some on your brush. It's so convenient. I love Distress Oxide inks. So what I'm going to do for the back of both of them is I'm going to add strips of foam tape, just kind of going up and down, top to bottom kind of thing with these guys, and then I'll adhere them to my card bases. So I'll add 4 strips to the back of each, and I'll only show you one, as I've showed you one through all of these, just because we'd be here all day if I showed you how I did everything on both cards, and, it's the same process for both cards. It's pretty self-explanatory. These are fairly simple cards. I think all in all, this probably took me about 1.5 hours to do both of them, and that's with just kind of thinking through the process and winging it as I went. And that's basically what I did, was winged it as I went. So I'm taking off the backing of this and the foam strips that'll come off. And then I'll add a little bit of liquid adhesive glue just in case I don't get the placing right the first time. And I find with adding a little bit of liquid adhesive, it just kind of gives it an extra stick. That way it's not peeling away with whatever adhesive is left off of the foam tape kind of thing. So once I've got that lined up and centered, I'm going to press this all down. And I really like the pink and the blue on the corners there. But I was feeling a little bored with it, so I thought I'd take it one step further. I got this Avery Elle Shimmer Spray. Probably need to buy another one because I've used it quite a bit. And I've covered up the circles there with the messages so I don't get them full of shimmer. And I just want shimmer on the card. And I'll take my heat gun tool and kind of dry them up a bit, and that way they're a little bit easier to handle I'm not touching the wet glitter. So once those are dry, I will go back and add some embellishments. Sorry, can't speak this evening. So these are Studio Katio Puffy Star Mix that I got. I think I got these from Paper Crafters Workshop a while back, or maybe it was Scrap and Stamp. I can't remember. One of the two, but they're really, really cute. They kind of remind me of the little stars that you find on the beach in the Animal Crossing game. Usually the night before, if you've had shooting stars and you make wishes on them, the next morning your beach is filled up with little tiny magical stars that you could pick up and craft stuff with. So I always think of these as my little Animal Crossing stars. So I'm just going to go one by one and glue them, and then I'll do the same for the top. I won't show you that, otherwise again, it'll take a little too long, and I'd like to keep my videos short so that way I don't lose the attention of my viewers. So once I'm happy with all those, we will move on to the next bit. So here I've got some Nuvo drops in black. I don't remember the name of it particularly, but it's black. It's glossy. It's pretty. I like it. And I'm just doing 3 little dots to kind of, I guess, offset the colors that I have and kind of match with the dark color that I have for the background and the magic message. Now this one I wasn't sure what quite to do, so I ended up taking the Morning Dew Nuvo drops. I might go back in later depending, and maybe put some stars on this one too. But at this point it was getting kind of late and I had to go to bed because, you know, adulting is really hard. So here you have it. 2 cards made out of scraps. I'm quite pleased with these. I think from now on I might just set aside all my scraps and at the end of the month maybe just make a pile of cards like this. I thought they turned out really neat. Really simple and a good way to use up excess paper that you like to hoard in a shoebox with a million other pieces of scraps. So I hope you try this method out too. If you've enjoyed today's content or found it helpful, please give this video a like. I also welcome you to subscribe as I post videos weekly. Here's another video I think you might enjoy. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Take care.